Hello everybody, this is Kirk Mastin at Mastin Labs. I'm going to give it a few seconds here for the stream to get set up correctly, and we want to just make sure that everything's going through, and then we will get started on the Portra Pushed live edit with these wonderful images that the community sent in. So I tried to pick images that I felt really displayed a lot of the different things that you might face. Things that would be really useful for learning how to edit, and images that have particular problems, or not problems, but just things to overcome in the image itself. And we'll go through those things. Some of the images are really just perfect straight out of camera and we don't need that much work. And some of the images have like flare or a green reflection, or they're underexposed. Or they have like dappled lighting, or maybe the perspective is off. And I'm going to go through each one and show you how I would edit with the new Portra Pushed pack from Mastin Labs. So looks like we are live. Yeah, everything looks good. All right, great. So Myrna Lowery sent this image in. Really beautiful setting. And I wanted to start with this one because I felt that it might have some green cast to it, or some color casts that we might have to work with because of the foliage around them. So as you can see in this wheat field or grass field, there's a lot of green around them. The nice thing is that it's later in the day, it's like towards sunset. So the green reflections are probably not going to be too bad. If the sun was like directly overhead, like if you're on a golf course and there's green under you reflecting like back up into your skin, then we'd really have a problem. But we'll see if there's any green reflection in this image, and yeah. Okay, and, oh yes, and as I'm editing, if you have any questions at all, just send them to us. Nikki is right next to me, and she'll be letting me know what your questions are, and I'll try to get to all the questions I can. I've only got an hour to edit today, but I'll try to get through as much as possible. All right, enough blabbing on. We'll get to it now. So this was shot with a Canon camera. So I'm going to go to the pushed Canon presets here. And I'm just going to start with, I think my favorite out of the whole pack for almost everything is Portra 160. It adds a lot of contrast. This is pushed film. When you push film, you're basically cooking the film a little bit longer in development, but when you push film, you're also shooting it at a higher speed than it's rated for. And this combination really nails down the black point in the image, the shadows. It lets you push if it was actual film, like push a little bit farther and how sensitive it is. But the result of this for digital shooters is that you're getting the contrast and the color changes of push film. So that's just applying Portra 160 straight up. This needs a little bit of a exposure adjustment, so I'm just going to increase the exposure. Let's see. Looks pretty good right there. This image actually isn't really suffering from, well, hardly any green reflection. So it was really hard to tell. It was a little bit underexposed, but just bringing it up, I can see it's not bad. There's like a little bit of green, like if you notice, like under her arm, just down in this area, and a little bit under his arm, but it's not bad at all. I've seen far, far worse. So that's just one click or two clicks. Portra 160, increase exposure. The white balance looks pretty good. If you like a warm image, I would just leave it. I don't even think it needs a tint or any kind of tint adjustment. You'll notice that there's a lot of flare over on this side. If that's something that you don't like, there are several ways you can kind of deal with that. One would be to get a brush and go over to dehaze and crank that up. Dehaze is a newer tool in Lightroom's set of tools, and it's really useful for dealing with haze. So if you want to, I have it set to the opposite of what I wanted. Okay. So you just bring it to a negative amount, and you can kind of like start knocking the haze down if you want. I actually felt that it looked really cool with the haze, but I just really wanted to show off this new tool to everybody. So hopefully that's helpful. And that is about all I would do with this image. So this is, let's go to the before. So that's before. And this is after with just very, very minor adjustments. So thank you very much, Myrna, for sending that in. And yeah, hope to see more of your work in the group. We're going to go to something completely different now. I wanted to show what it's like working with images that are, oh shoot, this is JPEG. Okay, all right, how about this? We'll roll with it. None of the presets that we make are meant for JPEG. JPEG means that the camera itself has done a lot of the processing in camera. So you're not starting with a really straight file from the camera. It's not as malleable as a raw file. But you can actually use the presets with JPEG. It's just that you have less control and you have to dial back the contrast a bit. But this would be a good challenge, and the image is underexposed. So double tough challenge here. This is from, I don't even know what camera this is from. Let's see. Okay, this is from a Nikon. So we're gonna go to the Nikon one real quick. And let's just start with Portra 400 push one stop. So I applied it. It's going to look just contrasty as all get out because it's a JPEG and it's underexposed. But just by increasing the exposure, maybe we can start to save this one. I like a challenge. Challenge is good. Since it's JPEG, a lot of the contrast is already built into the JPEG, and the presets we make are for RAW, where it adds a lot of contrast. So if you happen to shoot a JPEG and you wanted to use Mastin Labs on it, you can. You just have to really dial back the contrast once you apply a preset. And this goes for even the non-pushed presets. All the presets we make, you would have to dial back the contrast if you're using it on a JPEG. So I'm going to dial it back here and get the exposure up a little bit more. And this image can be warmed up quite a bit. And one more thing I would do is try to bring back the sky over here. So one way you can do that is just by applying highlight soft. So it's one of the tone profiles, and that'll bring back the highlights in the image. So it wasn't a huge change. If I go back just one step, that's with just straight up preset, contrast down a little bit, and that is adding highlight soft. So it really knocked down the highlights in the sky and a little bit in the rock and really helped save it. So yeah, this image looks pretty great for being underexposed and shot as a JPEG. So Amy Jasperson, thank you for sending it in. And I will just quickly show you a before and after. So this is before and this is after. So yeah, great image. Okay, so next image is going to be a raw image for sure, because that's what we should be doing, what we should be working on. Okay, so this image is from a Fuji camera. I know because of the RAF at the end of the raw file name there. And it's an architectural image, and I get to show you the cool upright tools for skew and changing perspective. So there's lots of really fun things to show on this. This would actually look great in black and white. I can just tell already. So maybe I'll throw that in at the very end. But we're going to start with Portra Pushed for Fuji. And we're going to go right to, let's just do Portra 160 plus 1. So that's just one click. You can see that it gives it a lot of punch and a lot of micro contrast without it looking, in my opinion, fake. That's what's beautiful about film, is that you get a really nice three-dimensional look without it looking overdone. So that is what we're able to do with these presets after tons of testing. But yeah, that's just one click. It looks really good to me. I'm gonna just go back again to before. So this is just straight out of camera raw, and that is just one click with Portra 160 push one stop. So the image to me looks a little bit pink, and the way that I can tell is I'm just looking at the stone here in it. There's probably a little bit of pink in that stone already, but it just feels a little bit too much, and there's a little bit of pink in the clouds. So I'm going to add a little bit of green with the tint slider, just a tiny bit. So about there. And I moved it, let me see here. negative 12 points, so like barely anything. I'm going to increase the exposure just a tiny bit, and I'm going to increase the temperature. So I'm editing it just the way that it is pleasing to me. There's no completely correct way of editing something. You have to know the conditions that it was shot in and what you're going for. It's really critical with skin, not so much with landscapes and buildings and other things, but this is just how this image looks best to me. So now we're going to get to the fun part. There's all this great stuff down here in the transform panel. So let me just like clean this up a little bit here. Okay, so you're probably familiar with the basic upright tools. And if you're not, you should be using them because they're amazing. But you've got like auto, level. So level would just be to fix the level, like the horizon. Vertical. So it's trying to find straight lines and make those vertical. But as you can see, it totally does not work with this image. And then there's full. Wait a minute, let me go back a few steps so you see it without. Okay, and then there's full, which is kind of a combination of the other tools. And then there's my favorite tool, my favorite new tool is called upright. And you grab this like honeycomb looking thing, and you just find a few lines somewhere in the picture that you believe should be straight. So I'm just gonna start with the corner of the building and just go down here and make a straight line. And then, let's see, I'm gonna find another line on the other side of the picture that should be straight. So the edge of this window should probably be straight. I'm going to click on constrain crop so you don't see all the white below it. Oh, we lose a lot of the building trying to correct this, so maybe I won't. But just so you can kind of see where we're going here. All right. Okay, so not constrain. We're not going to constrain the crop, but I just want to show you upright. So we've got 2 points for upright, and you can keep adding a few more. So I'm going to find a few more lines that are that I believe to be straight. And every time I add one of these, the image is getting corrected a little bit more, and it's getting better and better. So let's see. One more line that I think should be straight, and I could be totally wrong, is the top of this roof. And let me see, and maybe the top of this, I don't know what it is, a chimney or something, or window. All right. Oh, I've maxed it out. Anyway, just wanted to show you this tool. It's really cool. This is going to be before, and this is after. It looks a little bit too tall to me, so I probably should take a little more time with the upright tool, but it's something you can explore, and it's really, really cool. I love it. It's one of my favorite tools in the entire Photoshop or Lightroom toolkit. Let's bring these in. All right, there you go. So thank you so much, Casey. Yes.
So one thing we've never talked about in these, and it's kind of unrelated, but someone was asking about your export settings. So if you were going to export this out, what are some good basic settings to make sure that the image retains its quality?
Okay, great question. So people always ask, why are your images so sharp? Or I see this in the group sometimes, like some people just can't get a sharp image on export. So here are my tips. They're really simple. First of all, I don't do any, and I'm not like the end-all be-all authority on sharpness, because like there's a lot of opinions on this, but here's what I do. I don't touch sharpening in Lightroom at all. The sharpening that comes with the presets, in my opinion, is just perfect. So I don't touch that at all. When I go to export, I'll just go to export, get a file name, whatever. It says beer and cameras right now, but so my export settings always are JPEG, set at quality 75, color space, sRGB, always. If you do any of the other color spaces, you better know what you're doing or it'll look really crazy. It won't look right, and you'll wonder why the person's skin is green, etc. So sRGB. And then here's the big trick is for output sharpening, I do sharpen for screen and the amount low. I sharpen at the full size, and then that's how I share. Although I've heard that if you export it with these settings, but at 2048 pixels wide, I think is like the perfect amount for Facebook. So that is what I recommend.
Yeah, it's actually double if you go and you just search like Facebook, like image sizes, actually double whatever they tell you.
Oh.
Because everybody uses like
Retina displays and
Retina displays, so it looks, and then on your phone as well. So just doubling it, that's what I found. So the number you just gave is actually double what they recommend.
The other thing that can really affect sharpness is what aperture you're shooting at. So like if you're shooting, wide open, I just picked a random image. None of these images are going to show you exactly what I'm trying to tell you. Oh, maybe this one will. Okay. So if you're shooting like really wide open, so this is shot with a 50 millimeter at 1.4. I mean, having anything being out of the focus plane, even just a tiny bit, will just kill the sharpness of it when you go to export. You can use this to great effect though. Like if you have an image where almost everything is lost to the bokeh, like behind from being blurry from a wide open lens, the things that are sharp will look like extra super sharp just because there's a contrast in sharpness. Sometimes I'll shoot like a street photography type image where everything is sharp. I'm shooting at like f/16, and it'll appear to be not sharp because I have nothing to compare it to in the frame. That nothing's like really out of focus. So then we start to like pixel peep and like really look at it and go, oh, why isn't my camera sharp? And it actually is super, super sharp. I mean, if you shoot film, you'll be like, holy cow, any digital camera is super sharp compared to film. And sharpness ultimately is not that important. Does the image look really great? Yes or no? You can go down a rabbit hole with sharpening actions and all this sharpening stuff. And if you go too sharp, in my opinion, it looks really fake and really crazy. So I hope that helps. Just keep it really simple with sharpening in Lightroom. So sharpen for screen at the low setting. Okay, so we're gonna go to Abigail Meeker's photo then, because we landed on it. Do we have any more questions?
We do. We have a couple.
Okay.
So when you're shooting in RAW and you really do have a darker, moodier feel to all of your photographs in terms of shadow and warmth, is Mastin versatile in that sense as well? So like if you shoot darker anyway, it's only going to enhance what you're already doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't have a dark and moody image just because you put the presets on it. It has to be shot to look moody as well.
Yes. A dark and moody image comes from the image actually being shot with that intent. So dark and moody isn't just like a setting that you put on a photo. Neither is light and airy. You can't like put one on the other. It just doesn't work. You have to understand what kind of lighting that is. Dark and moody in general, I mean, I guess I would just describe it as the image itself is pretty dark with some things that are in a little bit of light that have, like the lightest part of the images make up a very small part of the whole image itself. If I was to reduce it to like a mathematical equation. Okay. Sorry, Abigail. We're going to go to Caitlin's image here for a second. So like in this image, most of the image is pretty dark. This image could be edited to be dark and moody pretty easily because we're starting with an image where it's pretty dark. This isn't necessarily because it's underexposed. It's because it's been exposed for these highlights, like in her hair and the side of this bar. I don't know if that's the best example, but like if I go back to Abigail's image here and pretend I just shot it like super underexposed, right? Because that's what a raw file is. If a raw file means that you can dramatically change the exposure and color temperature and tint after you shoot it. So getting it like really underexposed or overexposed, whatever, at the time of shooting is really not that much of an impact on the final look of the image. What matters is the actual light you were shooting in, like this, where we've got some highlights on her hair, etc. That'll be brought out in a moody photo. A lot of times people ask like, how should I shoot for these presets for moody look or for a light and airy look? The best answer is that it's not about underexposure or overexposure. Just expose normally. Normal is awesome. Just normal, normal, normal. Make it simple. What you're looking for is a certain kind of lighting condition that you're in. So like, imagine someone, I don't know, like chilling out by a window in a little cabin in the woods, and there's just like a little bit of light coming in. That's going to be a dark and moody photo. That's just like, that's as simple as it gets. Whereas if you have like two people cavorting through the desert in Palm Springs, you know, where it's like really bright out, that is going to be, in general, not a dark and moody photo. That's going to be a light and airy photo, as they say these days. So I hope that helps. I can't stress enough that it's not about presets or gear or anything. It's really about like seeing light and shooting in the right light. And don't get frustrated. This is like the part of being a photographer that's interesting, is that it might take you years to get a sense of light and know where exactly you want your subject to be. So it's an exciting journey. There's no need to rush it. Okay, so Abigail Meeker, we are back.
This is a good one for this next question. So
Okay.
Someone on Instagram, Lauren, she is asking about skin tone. So sometimes she feels like her skin tones go a little gray. This
Okay.
has some good skin
Oh,
tone,
yeah,
right?
okay.
So maybe you can talk about that.
So we had a question. This person asked, what's her name?
Lauren.
Lauren. Lauren on Instagram asks, sometimes when I use which preset? Any of them?
She didn't say which one.
Okay, I'm just gonna guess. It doesn't matter. Any preset, and I see gray skin tones. That is because the image is too cool. That's just straight up what it is. So, if you fight against what that preset or the film that it's based on, what that should look like, you're going to get weird skin tones. Like Portra is meant to be a yellow-orange based film, and it's just how it looks as the film. So if you were to apply Portra,
She said Fuji is what she was using.
okay, so she said Fuji. Regardless, if you see gray, it's because your temperature is too low. That's just what it is. It can also happen from having a lot of flare in a picture. So when you have a lot of flare, like in this photo, that is not even about skin tone. It's just like taking away the color from everything. That's a lot of color is tied to contrast. Contrast disappears when you have flare, and so things can appear gray. And there's ways to bring that back, and we'll get to that. But I hope that helps. So everything we do is about skin tone, getting it to look really beautiful or right or whatever, and we'll go through that. So, okay, so Abigail, we are finally going to edit your photo. This is with a Canon camera. I am going to just do Portra 160, just start here as usual. Looks awesome, just in one click. However, I'd say that this image needs a little bit of green. You can see her skin tone is very, both of their skin tones is very red. I'm just gonna zoom in on her leg. I don't know, there's a lot of skin there. And the back of her arm, you can see it's like kind of magenta. So this is an image that needs a little bit of help with tint. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of green until I feel that it's kind of balanced out. So like about there, and I'm gonna add a little bit of warmth. So this goes back to the gray skin question. If I don't add any warmth, it's pretty cool through here, like especially the front of her. So I'm gonna add a little bit of warmth. And it's gonna kind of rock back and forth on tint until I feel it's about right. I think that looks about right. So that's just with a tint and temperature change and applying the preset. So this is before, and that's after. One thing in this image I noticed right off the bat, though, is I think the sun is like right behind his head, because if I just crank exposure all the way down, I can see where there's no information at all. Like there's no digital information in the raw file around here at all. But there's a little bit in the sky. So I'm gonna, bring the exposure back up to normal levels, and I'm gonna use Highlight Soft. And that kind of nicely brings in a little bit of the sky and a little bit of the detail around her face and everything that was lost from it being such a change of brightness with the sun behind her. So thank you, Abigail. Beautiful image. Looks great. Do you have any questions?
Request for darker skin tones.
Okay. This is
quite a few people actually ask for that.
Okay, cool. So we had a few requests for editing on darker skin tones. Madison Johnson sent in this really beautiful image of a woman. Looks like she's like pushing up against glass there. Nice, even lighting. So this should be actually pretty easy to edit. So this is with a Canon camera. So we're gonna go, I don't know. I always start at the top and go to the bottom. So we'll just start at Portra 160 again. So that's one click. I think the exposure could be brought up quite a bit. So I'm just gonna bring it up. One way I think about exposure is that you're really working with a lot of images. You're working with the midtones. So the midtones are like where the bulk of the tones of an image normally lie. So if you look at a histogram, you'll see that there's like dark on one end, pure white on the other end, and then everything in the middle is like, or towards the middle is the midtone area. And when I'm trying to figure out what is the correct exposure, I'm really kind of moving around that middle mass the most. I'm not too worried about the highlights or the shadows, but just where does the biggest chunk of the image data go? And that's when I adjust the exposure slider. I'm kind of looking at the overall, I don't know how to explain it, like the weight of the photo. And when it feels like the weight is right, and again, this comes from experience, then I know that I've kind of got the right exposure for this image. So for me, I increase the exposure 0.9, and that seems about right. So that's just applying the preset and taking the exposure up. So this is before, and that's after. I think this image could benefit from lens correction on. So I just turn lens correction, and that kind of evens out both any kind of distortion in the lens and any kind of vignetting around the edges. So this is without, and this is with. Some people like to have that vignetting to kind of focus your eye towards the middle, but just from shooting film most of my life, or basically anytime I can, one thing I've noticed is that medium format lenses, like we shoot a lot with the Contax 645 and the Pentax 645, is that those lenses are huge and they've got a lot of glass in them and they're really well corrected and they have very little vignetting. And I have gotten used to that look. So I tend to use lens correction on. You don't have to, but I feel it gives it more of an editorial kind of magazine look. So that's with Portra 160 plus 1. I didn't have to do any tint or temperature adjustments at all. This is Portra 160 plus 2. So you'll see we're starting to get a little bit of the shift in the shadows. Like if you look at her hair and around the edge of the image, like the edge of the window here, we're starting to get a little bit of that red shift. And that just comes from pushing film 2 stops. So we're like really overcooking. If this is real film, we're overcooking it in development a lot. But some people use that for kind of an artistic, choice. And this is back to just pushed 1 stop. So push 2 stops. I'm going to go down to Portra 400. Portra 400 is just a beautiful film. It's got a little more yellow in the base. I don't know if you can really see it too well in this image. I'll go between this and 160. 160's got less yellow and more kind of a red base. So, I mean, it's very slight. I noticed it a little bit like on her forehead and on little bits of her cheek. This is Portra 400 push 2 stops. And then we're going to get to Portra 800. 800 has, again, kind of more of like an orange reddish base like Portra 160 does, but unlike Portra 160, it's a little more saturated. And then if you go to Portra 800 push 2 stops, you get a lot of crazy shifts in color. So we've got a little bit of green coming into the shadows and red. So yeah, this is like as wild and crazy as Mastin Labs gets. Because it's easy to make a preset that looks super funky, but will it stand the test of time? And we found that actual Portra 800 film push 2 stops is about as funky and crazy as we want to get right now, because we're all about the image staying really beautiful. So I liked it. I actually really liked it. Portra Pushed 2 stops. Looks beautiful. So this is before, and that is after.
We're having a lot of discussion around orange skin tones. And I know that comes from the base of the film that they're set on. Just depends.
Yes.
But say you wanted to take that back a little. How would you do that?
Well, the problem is that Portra films in general have an orange-yellow base to them. If I don't know. We'll have to do a whole post, like showing like Portra actual film versus the digital version. If you go to the website, we've got a lot of comparisons, like where it's digital and then film, and they're exactly the same. That's just how those films look. You can knock it back a little bit with the temperature slider. That's where a lot of people have trouble. See if I can find an image where we'll have that problem. So first of all, do people think this image is too orange?
Well, to be fair, the recording does make it like a little flatter than it actually is looking at your screen. So,
Oh, okay. It looks a little bit different in Facebook.
Yeah. See, she looks a little more flat.
Oh, weird. Okay. Well, that's too bad. Yeah, it looks like it's not completely capturing the correct color from this. So we'll have show notes and examples from this session so you can see these images yourself. I'm going to try to find something that's a little more, that might have the orange skin problem. So this is from Patrick Paredes, and I'm just going to apply Portra 160 plus 1 just to start with. Now this image is inside. Let me go back one. This image is inside. You'll notice that the floors are like kind of the dark stained oak. I'm not sure about the light source at all on this. I don't think that it's window light coming from the direction of the photographer. I think it's either a reflector. I'm thinking maybe a reflector because of this little patch on her shoulder, but I know it's not window light. So that's applying Portra 160. You're going to immediately have to drop down the temperature. If you apply any of these presets and you see skin like this, you have to like be able to adjust temperature. Don't expect it to be like a one click and you're done, because the camera doesn't know what you're trying to do. It's a neutral object. It doesn't know the color temperature that you're shooting in. It can guess. There's a lot of great like evaluative white balance algorithms that different cameras have, but ultimately it comes down to your human eyeball knowing what looks good. So I just dropped the temperature down, maybe a little bit too much actually. She looks a little bit green, so I'm going to increase the tint, and I'm just going to kind of work the temperature and tint sliders until I feel the skin looks about right. I'm also going to increase the exposure just a tiny bit. So this is with Portra 160, push 1 stop. I think this would look really cool, actually, the Portra 160 push 2 stops to get a little bit of red in the shadows. I like that a lot on indoor images. But you'll still see that, in this example, she is pretty orange. We can work down the temperature, but at a certain point, it's just going to lose like the feeling of the image. So one thing I wanted to point out for people that are having trouble with orange skin too is to look at the image before you do anything to it. So this is just like the raw image straight up. If you look at her face, and I'm not editing with any preset at all, like this is just, I'm just doing it. Oh, what the heck? Okay, my computer's going nuts. Let me get back to let me reset it to raw here. So this is the raw image. So this is just doing a hand edit. If I start to adjust it and add a little bit of contrast, that is just like straight up how this image looks. It's not any presets we make or anyone's presets that are making it go orange. This is just a lighting environment situation that you have to try to compensate for. So that makes a big difference. The makeup used, if there's any kind of foundation that's really, really orange, or if they've tanned a lot, that'll also make a big difference on how the image will look. So I'm going to go back to where we were doing an edit with Mastin Labs, and that's about where I would take it to. So I hope that helps. I'll try to find another one that would have an orange skin issue. Okay, here we go. So this is from Ashley Grandstad. It's a nice beach image. And I'm just going to start with Portra 160 again, or let's just do Portra 400 this time. Mix it up a little bit. So that's the first click just to apply it. I'm going to crop this image quite a bit so that we can see the skin better. And on this image, yes, she's got kind of orange skin. However, this can be fixed with a little bit increase in exposure and taking the temperature down. Just a tiny bit. But the ultimate thing to realize too is, like, if you're trying to get skin tone like this isn't even edited yet, but just look at what we're starting with. You're not going to get it on this couple because you're starting with a completely different base. So sometimes I wonder when people ask about that, I'm trying to tease apart, like, is it the actual subject that you're shooting, or is it something with adjustments in post-processing? I'm going to say 80% of the time it's actually the subject you're shooting. They've got a tan, a spray tan, foundation. You're shooting at sunset, so the light's like super warm. I don't want to be like, it's, nothing is ever my fault, but I would say that most of the time it comes down to making sure that the person that you're shooting has a skin tone that isn't already orange for some reason. That will make a big difference. You can fix it a little bit with temperature.
Yeah, you can see it on him. He's like pink and red.
Yeah.
And she's very, she's orange.
Exactly.
She has an orange base to her skin.
Yes, she's got an orange base to her skin. He probably doesn't tan as much, and he's got a totally different base. So I hope that answers your question. We're always available in the Mastin Labs community to play with any photos that you want to upload, raw photos, and we'll help you get the look you want. But just know that what we do, the only thing we answer to, the highest calling that we answer to, is that what we make matches film. So that as long as we're accomplishing that, we're happy. And we're happy to teach you what those different films look like, what their base colors look like, and help you adjust to what those looks look like. And we want you to fall in love with film and shoot film. So I hope that helps. So this is my subconscious edit, because I was just talking the whole time, but this is what I came to. I think I might add, again, highlight soft, just to bring in a little bit of the sky, and then increase exposure just a tiny bit. So that is my final edit. So this is before, and that is after. So it's 2:38. Okay, I got time for a few more. Do we have any more questions?
No, we're good.
Okay. So I'm going to go to, I tried to pick out images that I felt had problems, because I think it's super easy to edit images that are perfect straight out of camera. You should always be shooting for getting a good image straight out of camera. Like this image that I'll edit in a minute. It's just exposed nicely. There's no flare or anything weird going on. It's just a beautiful image straight out of camera, and that will take you leagues doing that. I'm not saying this is still a really cool image, but we're starting at quite a bit underexposed. So this will be an interesting image to edit. It should turn out just fine. Exposure doesn't matter that much when you're shooting raw. So this is a Nikon. So I'm going to apply, I'm going to do Portra 800 this time. So I'm going to start with Portra 800, push one stop. It looks completely too dark and crazy, but that's because the image was very underexposed. See what kind of camera this is, just curious. Okay, so it's a Nikon D750. It'll handle this underexposure like a champ. It won't hurt it at all. So I'm just gonna, I applied Portra 800. I'm gonna increase the exposure. It needs a lot of warmth. So I increase the exposure and you'll notice that her skin is super pale. I mean, she's already a very pale person, I'm assuming. But this is like very, very pale. So I'm gonna increase the warmth a little bit. And I also think that she's a little bit magenta. So I'm going to increase the green with the tint slider just a tiny bit. And I generally just kind of rock it back and forth until I feel like it's about right. It could be a little bit warmer. And it can actually be, increase the exposure just a tiny bit. I'm going to straighten the image because I'm really into like things being straight. It's a toughie. It's cool though. I like the whatever grass or whatever she's standing on is really cool, and that barn is really cool. So that's Portra 800 with just a few minor adjustments. This is before, and that is after. You know, you don't need to underexpose to get a moody look or any kind of look, but it won't hurt you. Exposing normally is easier. It just means a little less editing, so that's, again, what we always recommend. See you later, Chad.
Everyone say goodbye to Chad.
He's just working away back there, making cool stuff for the website. It'll be out soon. All right, see ya.
We have a request for something lots of green, and I see there's a couple in there that you
sure
are going to work on anyway.
All right, so I just want to say thank you, Caitlin. Cool image. Okay, this is from Carolyn Siebert. This image I chose out of the ones submitted because there's two things going on here. One is that there's a heck of a lot of green, and the second is that the lighting is really uneven. You'll see in a minute why I say that, but just look at the lighting like on this girl back here, and this girl's dress and her flowers, and then we've got some dapple light on the ground, and then over here it's like really, really hot. I'm sure the image will look fine, but this is, again, a challenging one, and I want to do challenging images. So this is with a Canon camera. Let's just do Portra 400. So that's just applying Portra 400 just straight up. There's a few things that I would do immediately. One would be to warm up the image. It's way too cool. So I just warmed it up a little bit. And the second is don't be afraid to increase exposure a little bit. I just increased it a little bit just now, 0.3, and it kind of helps to, like I said earlier, take the midtones and move like kind of the bulk of the image a little bit brighter. So now we get to the interesting part. So I said before that this image had kind of uneven lighting. You'll see, especially now after applying Portra 400, you'll see that the contrast is like all over the place. It's really hard to see that at first with a raw image, so I'll go back to the raw. Because a raw image is meant to take away almost all contrast. The reason that we shoot raw is that it's such a great starting point to bring an image, to wherever you want it to be. But we take it pretty far just by applying the preset, and it really starts to show you where the lighting is uneven. So one thing that we have with all of our preset packs are tone profiles. And the tone profiles come from the Fuji Frontier scanner next to me, and they were created to solve these problems. So if we have a lot of like hot spot areas, again, it was like this girl here, a little bit in the ground. I think she's a little bit hot. I mean, she's very hot. The lighting is a little bit hot. You can just use highlight soft, and that kind of knocks it all back and evens it out. It's not a huge, dramatic, like over-the-top change, but it's a really pleasing change. If you really wanted to even out the dark and the light areas of this photo even more, that's why we have all soft. So all soft brings out some shadow detail, and it brings in highlight detail at the same time. So to recap, I'm just going to show you without any tone profile. So that's no tone profile. And then if I add all soft, you'll see that it kind of evens it out in a nice way. So I hope that helps. If you have really uneven lighting, you can also just go in and take a brush, with like exposure, and just kind of like knock down some of the areas that are super bright. So I'm just doing a really sloppy job of this. I like to work in broad strokes, so I can just kind of hit all the areas that are a little bit too bright. And you notice I'm not like spending a ridiculous amount of time, but just kind of hitting all those areas and then going back to the brush and dialing it back a little bit. So I start with it really strong so I can see where I'm working, and then I just dial it back to where I feel like I've kind of tapped those highlights down to a manageable level. So that is before and that is after. I hope that answered some questions with green. I don't know exactly what the questions are. But yeah, film green in general is a lot mintier looking than digital green. Digital green's super yellow. That's just how it looks.
This will be our last one.
All right, so I have one more image. I think guys should get a little bit of screen time in our editing session. It's very female heavy. But I'm just gonna go through this real quick. So that's Portra 160 +1, so +1 stop. Do lens correction on. Increase the temperature. He's way too cool. I mean, he's a cool guy, but he's like way too cool. To about there, and increase the exposure just a tiny bit. It's a little bit green, so I'm going to add just a tiny bit of tint towards magenta. And I'm just going to keep playing with exposure, temperature, and tint. So that's all I'm doing. Shouldn't have to like mess with anything else really. So this is before, and that is after.
We do that a couple more times. They want to see more before and afters.
Oh sure, okay. I'll let it hang on the before and after. So this is before, and this is after. So very few steps. It's really just a matter of really kind of bouncing around between temperature, tint, and exposure if you have an image that is kind of complicated. Or not complicated, but just not super straightforward. So this was kind of underexposed, shot at a very late time of the day, maybe like blue hour, and next to a big green reflector. And that is the after. I have time, I think, for one or two more images.
Could you do some of your own images of side-by-side film and digital? There's somebody asking about that.
Sure. What's their question?
Said, show us the original film and what it should look like, and then the digital film, doing an edit to match.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Let me find something here for you. We're going to go into our testing archives. Oh gosh, I don't know. Let me find something with skin. Lots of skin.
Demetrius is a good one.
Yeah, he's good.
Oh, there's me.
Let's do Demetrius. Or let's do one out of here and then Demetrius as well. So stop. Ah! Oh, come on. This thing has like 32 gigabytes of memory and it still like freaks out. Sad, sad, sad. Okay. Okay, I gotta figure out which is which here. Okay. So let's grab that one and that one. Oh, wait. Sorry, I got them backwards. Okay, so that's Portra 160 pushed one stop. And then this is The other one. Okay. All right. First of all, internet people, notice this. Her skin is orange because, or what you would think is orange, because that's actually how Portra 160 looks. That is, I can totally understand that. That's kind of a hard thing to get used to at first, but once you fall in love with film, I mean, it's just that actually becomes kind of what you think it should look like. So, not trying to make fun of anyone who, doesn't like orange, but yeah. So, okay. So on the right, so on the left, that's a film scan, Portra 160 push one stop with a Pentax 645. And then on the right, we've got a Canon, I don't know, 6D or something file.
Yeah, 6D.
6D, okay. And then I'm gonna just apply Portra 160, push one stop, lens correction, push up the exposure just a little bit, bring down tint just a little bit, and temperature. So I could probably do this even better, but I think that's not bad. So this is, again, Portra 160 versus Canon on the other side. And this is the before, and that is the after. Let's get something else. Do you want to do Demetrius then?
Yeah, I think it's a great example of someone with a darker skin tone.
Yeah. Okay, let's see, where is he? Where are you?
There you go.
I wanted to do there's a really good, like straight on. Oh, stop. Oh my God. Okay, come on. Sorry, everybody in internet land. We're going to have to like edit this to make it. Okay. If anyone knows anyone at Apple, man, I mean, I love Apple, but maybe I have a bad iMac or something. Okay. So on the left, we've got Portra 400 push one stop. On the right, we've got a Canon file. Totally
shot by John Duenas.
Shot by John Duenas, fantastic photographer, Portland, Oregon, johnduenas.com.
johnduenas.com.
Can't say enough.
Love the guy.
Yeah, I think he's in San Francisco right now. So,
hi, John.
Hello, John. Bring back some cool photos. So I'm just going to edit this real quick. So this is so the first one we did is Portra 160 push one stop. This is 400 Portra 400 push one stop. So that's the first click. You just increase the exposure and the white balance a little bit. I think I went a little too high in exposure. And then adding a little bit of green, just a tiny bit, and then I'm gonna do all hard. So there you go. That is unedited, and that is edited to match Portra 400 push one stop. So.
All right. Well, you have to go pick up your kids.
I do have to go pick up my kids. I hope that was useful and handy in some way. If we didn't answer your question or didn't cover something you wanted me to cover, just come to the Mass Labs community. You can join. We'll add you ASAP, and you can post a raw file there. Either I or most likely someone in the community will be glad to edit it for you and show you what's possible. Right now, everyone's very, very jazzed about the Portra Push Pack, which we also really love. But if you're curious about the Fuji Color Pack or the original Portra Pack, so not pushed, there are great editors in there that would be willing to help you out as well. So we've got an amazing community. It's like kind of the best thing about Mastin Labs. So come in, say hi, and we'd love to help you.